On this day, we tell the tale of a mystical northern land where an event is held unlike any other. Combatants are armed with only a Spartan chariot that must survive the test of essentially a go-kart track filled with like-minded idiots. This is the legend of the 4 Hours of Lochgelly. The 4 Hours of Lochgelly is an endurance race, or challenge depending on who you ask, where teams buy a dirt cheap econo box and compete to score the highest number of laps in a 4-hour period. The only rules are that the car must have an engine size under 1.4 litres and they cannot be modified. It is the perfect entry into ultra cheap grassroots racing. I bought a 1.3 litre Suzuki Wagon-R for £100 a couple of months before the race was supposed to start. With my naivety at an all-time high, the plan was to stick an MOT on it, drive it to Driftland for the race and then drive it home again. I got an MOT test done, figured out what it needed, repaired the major faults myself, then basically forgot about it until about a week before the race would start. I couldn't get an MOT retest sorted out in time, so I sold the Suzuki and bought a 1.0 litre Toyota Yaris with 2 months MOT left and a scraping rear brake drum for about £200 and carried out a last minute brake repair. It turned out the retaining pin on one of the fitting springs had rusted away, so I had to bodge it with a split pin and hope that it would hold. Luckily it did, and the chariot was ready to go. Since this was our first actual race, and our car was slower than the majority of the grid, we weren't kidding ourselves that we were even going to come close to winning. With a win essentially impossible, our sights were originally aimed at beating a team of our old uni mates who also had a Yaris entered. This worked out perfectly for us, as their Yaris was a 1.3, so if they finished ahead, then we can bitch about having a slower 1 litre car, so the victory is meaningless. But if we beat them, then it's uber levels of embarrassment. Although, after saying all that, we figured out pretty early on it turned into more of a team effort, helping each other with pit stops, improv repairs, etc. In the end, having a 2-team size group gave the day a much more fun feeling of camaraderie of trying to get both cars to survive the whole 4 hours. Also, somebody didn't set the lap timer properly on the 3 practice laps, so we actually had no idea what place we came anyway.
Loser!
Why do Volvo drivers always have to ruin everything? Once we actually got into it, it became instantly clear that this was a cross between a destruction derby and a balls to the wall race. Our chances of driving home at the end of the day were pretty slim, which was something we should have realised when none of the other teams arrived without a trailer or flatbed. So we decided just to go for it, attempt to avoid pile-ups and deal with the wreckage at the end of the day. The driving itself was pretty intense. Some of the other drivers had a death wish, and it was almost impressive how risky their driving was. There were 2 rolled cars, and probably about half of the cars didn't even finish the event. The pit stops involved more repairs than expected, but we came out pretty unscathed compared to the other teams. Other than freeing up some seizing sliders on the front brake calipers and pulling out the rear arch liners after some rear end shunts, our car didn't really need anything else. The black Yaris didn't do too much worse. They had an exhaust get torn off pretty early on and also had to do some panel beating to avoid scraping inside the arches after some heavier impacts. I have to say though that it was pretty great that the Yarises of that era had metal bumpers, so you could just beat everything back into place rather than have to pull off smashed plastic bits. We did have a bit of a pit side mishap at one point when we put the driver's side front wheel back on after freeing up our brake caliper. We accidentally put the wrong wheel on in a hurry to complete our F1 level pit stop, so for about 45 minutes the car was running with a 14-inch and a 13-inch wheel on the front axle. This caused some catastrophic understeer, but even after reverting back to the original 14s all round, the handling wasn't a lot better. Overall, it was a spectacular day and we will definitely be doing it again, and I'm hoping I can get a few more teams entered for some proper rivalries. While watching from the side of the track, I actually sent this clip to my siblings group chat, none of whom are petrol heads, because I thought even if you aren't into cars, this is pretty cool. But unfortunately, all I got back was this. so I guess we weren't as cool as I thought. I can honestly say it's the cheapest way to do any form of motorsport I've ever seen, with maybe the exception of cheap drag racing at Crail or Santapod, although that's not really on the same level as circuit racing. Overall, the day cost us about £150 each for everything since it was split 3 ways. This was excluding the parts I pulled off the car and the scrap value of what was left after everything was over. Also, it is probably worth noting that we were the only car to drive home. It did involve beating out a body panel that was rubbing on one of the wheels, which was much to the dismay of the other patrons in the McDonald's car park, but it did make it home with no problems. And that about wraps it up for this video. Apologies for the long delays between uploads. Life in the lockdown has been pretty uneventful, so getting footage of interesting stuff has been hard to get, even though this video is about a race that happened 5 months ago. If you liked what you saw, please like, comment and subscribe, and until next time, goodbye.